Welcome, everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling. This is the Raging Verbalist number 65. Hard to believe, 65. Speed limit in many states. Don't exceed that speed limit, kids. Come on now. Anyway, so the Raging Verbalist is every week. And, of course, with me, as always, is the lovely Sandra. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to have a great Raging Verbalist. And so all of you who are out there, this is going to be probably maybe one of the most controversial ones we've ever done because of what this story is all about. For those of you who have not subscribed, do that now. Hit that like button. Hit it now. Hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't even like it, kind of hit the what the heck? What is it going to cost you? Also, we have a Facebook page called Position to Win Book. And go check that out because, of course, that's my book and all of that stuff. So also, Sandra, for those who don't know, Sandra sits in for you and asks those deep probing questions that you would ask. Now, if you're yelling at your screen right now, that means that you should be on the page typing a question appropriately because Sandra will be reading it, and she has very sensitive side to her. And anyway, so with that, what are we going to talk about today, Sandra? This should be, I know what the topic, but this will be a fun one. So what are we talking about today?
All right, what was all of the crazy commotion going on with GameStop?
GameStop. So for those of you who have not heard about GameStop, and of course, we've got now politicos involved. I did not do GameStop immediately because I knew that the final shit had not hit the fan. There'll still be more to hit probably down the road. So for those of you who don't know, GameStop is a retailer shrinking ever quicker. And this retailer, of course, was selling games for video games. And, that was a great idea. Do have a specialized one. I mean, if you could have one for, Bed Bath & Beyond and sell smelly soap, why can't you sell games? And in fact, it became a pretty interesting marketplace because people would go there and spend their usually, and they're younger. I'll just say that. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't older gamers, but it's one of those things that there are lots of young gamers, and they would be, begging their parents to buy games. And the cool part about GameStop is you could also go and take your physical game. Wow, remember when that happens? I mean, that was just like a few years ago. And you could take it in and you could trade it in, get some GameStop bucks or whatever it was, and then you could go get a new game. So GameStop really did well, and it rode that kind of trend up because gaming has become pretty big, and it's become massive. And then GameStop started hitting some problems. First off, all the publishers for games woke up and said, well, if we sell a game, like you're selling a CD, a DVD, a Blu-ray, for those of you who don't know what those things are, you can just Google them, okay? And they said, hey, why don't we just sell it digitally? First off, here's the cool part about selling digitally is that the player could download the game, and then here's the neat part. They can't hand it to somebody else. Their friend can't give it to them. Now, I know there are hacks and there are people who are out there in the dark web and all that other stuff. Don't go there. But if you did, you'd find out that there's all this stuff out there. So that was a really cool thing. However, we don't need GameStop anymore. We don't need to pay them, or and they're not paid directly by the publishers, but they would actually are retailers, so they would get a markup, as they should, and away you go. So GameStop peaked, I don't know how many years ago because I didn't follow it. I'm not a gamer, never been a gamer, other than I gambled professionally, but that's a little bit different. And GameStop was doing great, except that, well, the market started falling away, retailers started falling away, and then GameStop went into the toilet. So that's kind of like the quick background for those who don't know exactly who GameStop is. Now, GameStop is one of those stocks that was a darling of Wall Street. A darling, had the eye of all of these people who said, what a wonderful idea. How to play this new trend. Well, see, trends don't last as long as they used to. Think about it this way. Many companies would go through long cycles where you bought them and 15, 20 years later, they're still going up and life is good. But that not so much today. Today, and for all of you who think there's a lot of permanence in the high-tech wonders that we have today, and again, I should have said this up front. I do not own GameStop. I have never owned GameStop. I have never shorted GameStop. I've never owned an option on GameStop, never sold an option on GameStop. Have no financial interest in GameStop. Don't even own any shares of any hedge funds that are in GameStop. So there you go. I got that out so that way nobody can come over. This is all protected under free speech while we still have it. And so I can say whatever crazy shit comes out of my mouth, I can say it. Anyway, so what happens is that these stocks that are now fallen angels, if I mean, and to think about that in angels in Wall Street, I don't know, but once they start to fall out of favor, what happens is that the pack of mongrels, the pack of wolves come after them, and what happens is that these smart people will do the analysis and say these companies basically are dead, and they're walking their final mile. And of course, we want to stick with miles versus kilometers because you get a little bit extra time if you're walking your final mile instead of. I mean, just think about it. If they had the death penalty in some of these really highfalutin European countries, they said you got to walk the final kilometer, and you go, wait a second, can I just walk the final mile? It gives me a little bit more time. No, anyway. So what happened is that the smart hedge fund people started shorting the stock, and they started depressing the stock and driving it down and driving it down and driving it down, which is how we got to here. Because what happened is that they hammered the crap out of the stock, and it went down to $2.57 a share. Now they're still losing money, but they're shorting the stock, and because of that, well, a funny thing happened, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But I'll have Sandra ask another question, and then we'll dive into it. But just remember, we were down to $2.57 a share way back in March, April timeframe, and this whole thing exploded over this short period of time. So, Sandra, what is the next question?
Yeah, so what is shorting a stock?
So the interesting thing about markets, and it's hard to understand. Sandra comes from an ag background. For those of you who don't know, ag is agriculture, and they had cows, and you own a cow, but a cow isn't just stay there, right? Cow starts as a little tiny cow and keeps getting bigger and bigger because it eats. Similar to some of you maybe who are going, I got to lose some weight, but anyway, but you get them bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually, well, you don't want to find out what happens to your cow, but anyway, it ends up in your burger or, something like that. But in the financial world, what you can do now, so think about that would be like buying along. So buying along means you buy something, you acquire something, and you own the shares of that company. So you don't own the company, you own a fractional interest in the company. So you buy long. Now in physical assets, you either own a cow or you don't own a cow, right? I mean, there's no imaginary cow that you don't own, right? Well, I guess some people have it, but that's for another day. In fact, I'm going to tease for a future Raging Verbalist. My favorite funny fall down stupid investment people made is they actually invested millions of dollars, and I knew the guy who was the trustee of all this thing, and they invested in bull semen. Now, I mean, but we'll talk about that at another time. I'm just teasing you, but just mark that down. When will John talk about the bull semen debacle? But that's a different issue. So anyway, so you buy the stock, that's buying it long. However, for financial markets to work, is that for every person who buys a stock, there has to be a seller. For every seller, there has to be a buyer. There has to be a balance. This is how markets work. And for the average person, this is where it becomes a little dicey, because in essence, stock itself is it really tangible? I mean, when you own, if you were sitting there right now and you owned 100 shares of Apple, you couldn't walk into an Apple store and say, well, let's see, Apple's worth, $2.3 trillion approximately. I own 100 shares. It's $135. So I own this fractional percentage. So I own the, well, I own the little part of this display is my part. Well, that isn't how it works because it's all in it. Now, selling short is the opposite, which is that we sell the stock without owning it, which is where people really start getting weirded out. Because what happens is that you go to a broker, and the broker said, you say, hey, I want to go sell this here GameStop. And the broker says, okay. And they look in your account. Now, understand this is happening digitally. So I'm just trying to, we're going to turn it into a little bit more of a, tangible thing, right? So this is the animated version. So you go to your broker and your broker goes, hey, how you doing? Hey, I want to sell the stock. And they go, well, let me go see it. And they open up the cupboard and they say, well, wait a second. You don't own any GameStop. And they say, well, but I still want to sell it. And they go, okay, well, I'm going to go borrow it from somebody else, Bob or Sally or whoever. And I'm going to borrow the stock from them and lend it to you so you can sell the stock, even though you don't own it. Now, all of that used to be the way it was because you used to have physical shares, by the way. I mean, coolest thing I ever had was I had physical shares in a company that I owned that went public. And we lost this thing. That's another story. But this thing was worth like a bunch of money. It was like, like crazy. And then we went, well, maybe we better go, tender that and then turn that into, put it into the account. But that's a different. So what happens is that we end up borrowing the stock from somebody else and we sell it. Now we sell it because if we sell it at, let's make it easy, $100 a share, and the stock goes down to $50 a share, we then buy the stock back at 50. We sold it for 100, so therefore we made $50 on a stock that we didn't own. Now you say, well, why doesn't everybody do that? Well, there's a couple things. Number one is that to sell it short at 100, we had to give the broker money to essentially buy those shares. And you say, well, or to lend us the shares, not buy them, but lend us the shares. So what it is it's called a margin account. That, for those of you who don't understand that, it's margin, not margarine. No, we're not talking about artificial butter. We're talking about margin. So you had to borrow the money to short the stock. Get it so far? So that's a pretty cool idea. Now, along come these, so now in our animated thing, along comes these hedge funds. Hedge funds hedge by buying some stocks, shorting other stocks, and they attempt to create a balance. By creating a balance, they can make money in markets that go up and go down. And for the most part, people get very strangely weirded out. Now, there's another downside of shorting a stock. Let's say you short a stock at 100, but it goes to 200. You basically owe more money. You have to come up with another gym bag of money because you're now out of margin rules. So you have to keep giving them money. Let's say it goes to infinity and beyond. It's a Toy Story kind of thing. Well, you got to keep coming up with more and more money, and that's what happens in our story. And we'll get to that in just a minute of how GameStop caught a lot of very smart people out because they thought they had it figured out. And here's the interesting part of the universe is that every time somebody thinks they've got it totally knocked and figured out, this is probably a relative of Murphy, comes along with a big giant stick and beats the living daylights out of you. So that's what shorting a stock is. Does that make it clearer, Sandra?
Yes, clear as mud. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so
now, and I'll just say that the reason why it's challenging to understand is that back to the cow story, you either have a cow or you don't have a cow. In this case, you're borrowing an imaginary cow and selling an imaginary cow that doesn't exist yet because you're borrowing against a cow. Now, for those of you who now understand how the commodities markets work, the futures market does exactly that. They're buying and selling things that don't exist, which is partly what. Now, in shorting a stock, something exists, but it's only what's called a book entry. So what it is it's actually just a blip in a computer file. Okay, so what's your next question?
All right, what percentage of a company can you short?
Now, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where GameStop becomes crazy story. So a bunch of people who are sitting there with maybe too much time on their hands, who are not really investors in stocks. Now, for all of you who are out there who start questioning the validity of why we have all of these different markets, and does this make any sense, and do they create value or wealth or not, understand that money is going to go wherever money is treated to the best possible return. So what happens is that we have a whole bunch of people on social media. Now, we've seen people do, flash sales. We've seen mobs get formed. And on Reddit, there was a group of people, estimated like 2.2 million of them. And what they did is they start looking at these stocks, and these stocks that have been heavily shorted. Now, if you think this thing is going to go to zero or pretty much zero, how far would you short it? Would you short tons and tons and tons? Because the likelihood of you making money goes up, right? I mean, you have all your investors. Now, by the way, anybody who thinks that the big guys, don't have somebody they answer to, they do. It's called their investor pool. So when you sit there and say, well, the big guys are going to take it in the shorts, well, this is a little ridiculous to think that way. So here's what happens is that all these people on Reddit, and this is where the regulators are getting crazy. So this is where I put on my libertarian hat. Libertarian hat goes on. These people with their First Amendment rights start saying, hey, check out this GameStop thing. It's $2.57 a share or thereabouts. And that means if you can convince your mom, or you can convince somebody to let you get $1,000. See, it used to be just to open up a stock account was really hard to do. But now, because of places like Robinhood, you can do it pretty easily. And that's cool, because I'm all about letting more people in to play the game. I'm all about lowering barriers. So any of you who are out there who are thinking we need more regulations, you're talking to the wrong guy if you're talking to me, because I believe that we need fewer regulations. So all of these people start shorting, hedge funds start shorting and shorting and shorting and shorting these stocks. And guess what happens? Well, they short 50%, 80%, 100%, 140% of GameStop at the peak. And I wasn't able to verify it, but I've heard this anecdotally, but 140% of the stock was shorted. And you're saying, how in the heck do you do that? Well, understand, what does that look like, right? So we have more imaginary shares, and away we go. We're in good shape. We'll just keep moving in that direction. And of course, as I'm saying these controversial things, it tells me that my internet connection has become unstable. I'm starting to think conspiracy theory, people. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, yeah, because they say the truth is out there. No, I don't know if it's out there or not. But anyway, so what happens is these people start shorting and shorting and shorting because there are all these hedge funds, and everybody is like piling on because they're waiting for the demise, the end of GameStop. Because see, at some point in time, if GameStop, which keeps closing stores, it keeps doing this, if they actually go bankrupt, the shares are just going to gap down. And then you don't have to deliver the shares back because you just, pay. You just made all this money. Okay. So Reddit people are sitting there. They have their Robinhood accounts, and now they start buying the shares. And as they're buying the shares, there's this little known thing that you can do, little known button you can click. And what you can click is, I'm going to buy 100 shares, right? So at $2, at $3 a share, that's how much? $300. So I'm going to buy 100 shares, and I'm going to now check the box, which most people don't even know about. But because we have all these people on social media, we have this collective group who understands what's going on. And they say, but make sure you check the box that says, you cannot lend my shares for shorting, which just exacerbates the situation. Now that's where they're trying to think about changing regulations. And I say, bullshit, don't do that. So here's what happened. We went from $2.57 a share to $483 a share. And if you bought it at $3 and you sold it at 483, you made a ton of money. And by the way, the reason why it went up that fast is because all those hedge funds that owned millions and millions and millions of shares, just understand that they have 69, almost 70 million shares are outstanding. And in fact, right now, 108% of all the shares are owned by institutions, which means that the smart guys, the smart money people, got the crap pounded out of them because every time they would now they have all these short positions. Every time they could, the Reddit crowd or the other crowd could say, "Hey, look at this." So like, there's a famous guy who bought 8% of the company at $6 a share. I mean, even today, or maybe $8 a share, right? But it's 8%. It was a threshold, and that guy made a fortune. Now, can he get out? Question him. So that's what happened. They actually shorted 140%, and right now the short percentage is at 30.7 as we're recording this, according to my online. So people went through the roof on that. Now, if you want to go find out more about how companies operate and how people get to where they are, and how these positions take place, and I'm not talking about stock positions, but I'm talking about how businesses work, what you can do is you can go saunter, I like that word, saunter over, and check out my books. Now, the first book that you want to read if you're interested in this whole thing is Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it. Position to Win, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. Also, you can get it electronically on, again, Kindle, Nook, and also on Apple. And here's what I'm going to tell you. If you read that book, you'll understand that think about how these two disparate groups position themselves, and they position themselves in a pretty interesting way. Because on one side, the short sellers, the hedge funds, said, look, we got this thing knocked. We got it locked. We're going to make a ton of money. This stock is basically dead, moribund. And it's going to go get driven down to the sea. It's going to go broke. In fact, they've got a whole bunch of things that aren't going to happen. The market trends are against them. Retail, digital, all these things start pushing against them. And there's not a lot that they were going to do at that point in time. And then the funny thing happened, and of course, we've now turned this into a whole different situation. But if you want to find out how businesses succeed, but more importantly, why most businesses fail, and the vast majority of businesses fail in the first 5 minutes, go check out Position to Win. And if you do that, then hopefully you'll actually figure out how to make money in your business, your situation. Go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com, and check it out. You can also get me to sign a physical copy and send it off to you. And more importantly, you can find out all the other stuff we do. And I know where I speak because I have done turnarounds for over 25 years. So when this happened, I was not surprised. I was not surprised that people were getting caught out. Anybody who thinks the game is always going to stay the way it is can always be surprised on the other side. Okay, Sandra, what is the next question?
So with GameStop and the whole Robinhood versus the hedge funds, who are the real winners and losers?
So I look at it as if you bought it at a certain price and you were part of that mob, that bunch of little Davids attacking the big Goliaths. And by the way, hedge funds are filled with some of the smartest people in the world. They absorb incredibly smart talent. So while everybody is sitting there dancing and spending a lot of time to try to figure out how to stop this phenomenon, the next time that this goes to happen, and it will happen again, it will not happen the same way, because the hedge funds will find out about it. They'll be more aware. So they were kind of laying around in their hammocks or whatever they were doing and got caught unawares. To me, the real winners are if you bought it at 5 and sold it at 50, you're a real winner. Sadly, though, there are a lot of people who wrote it up to $500,000 or $1 million and didn't take the money off the table, couldn't get the money off the table, couldn't do all of those things, and in fact are sitting there with empty pockets. In my mind, the winners are the fact that it wakes people up that there is no sure bet, and that one needs to always be on their toes. Robin Hood got a black eye because Robin Hood designed a system. They're a brokerage company, and of course, aptly named. So when they named it, they thought, man, we are so clever. You know, we're going to take it away from the rich and give it to the poor, right? That's their whole kind of pitch. We're going to do this for the little guy. However, when all of the little, little, and I guess in this gender non-specific, all the little zygote investors were putting in their orders. See, you think that when you're touching the app, you're touching the market, but you're not, because the real thing is that's just an order entry facade. That's the front end. All the other stuff happens behind the scenes, and Robinhood got swamped. Now, if you got stuck and you weren't able to sell, and you're now pissed off, or you've lost your grandma's inheritance or whatever, all I can say is write this down and I mean, you could type it into a digital something. I always like to keep it on like a little 3x5 card, and that is, here is a lesson that I learned so long ago from my Vegas days, and the initials are TS, but you want to get a big Sharpie and you want to write out really big, tough shit. Okay, so if you lost your shirt, tough shit. And if you're feeling bad about it and you're recoiling and say, well, there should be more regulations. The hedge fund people have come out and said there should be more regulations. They're talking about market manipulation. Well, you know what? The market is made up of all these opinions. I don't see that it's manipulation. And here's why. Because unlike having a bunch of stock analysts that say you should buy it, unlike having a bunch of people working in concert, there were lots of people who were buying this stuff and putting it together. And this was the social media version of this. And welcome to a new modern age. So for all those big hedge fund managers who lost millions of dollars and lots of bonus dollars, I would say get yourself a really nice piece of parchment and have a calligrapher write tough shit on that, because that's my view of it. I have played markets where the market went up and I could not get out as fast as I thought. And what you do is you learn that sometimes you have to understand how rapidly things move and change. Happened to me earlier this year when the market collapsed after COVID. Caught me unawares. Ow, painful. Now things have come back. Again, I'm not condoning anybody who does illegal things. What I see in the entire GameStop thing is that you had hedge funds that were really believing that there was no way that they were going to get hammered. And when they started driving short interest to the roof, you had a bunch of smaller investors who said, you know what, we can buy up the shares, buy up the float, and create what's called a short squeeze. And that's really what happened. And this is a classic short squeeze. Now, this has been going on since time began. It happens and manifests itself every now and then. And all I can tell you is that for all of you Reddits who are out there, and I applaud you for having the temerity, how's that for a nice fancy word without telling them that they got a big pair, is that's great. However, understand that there's a lot of people who will toss their money into this thing and lose their shirt, because the short squeeze is always a tough thing to pull off, because the market has a way of changing and morphing in ways that you don't know. And I'll share this piece of advice to everybody. If you have a profit in something, and if you have a profit in anything that you're a position you have, and you're not sure if you should if you should stay or should go, there's a song by the Clash that said, should I stay or should I go? When I'm trading options and I do that, I can tell you that last week I was faced with that Same thing. Should I stay or should I go? I was right on the edge. I had a profit. Always, always, always take your profit off the table. It's one of the things that people never do in Vegas. Take that profit and never feel bad about what happens after it. Nobody ever went broke by taking a profit. Now, that's not investment advice, it's life advice. So, the real winners and losers are, I think the real winners are that the market proved that the market is what it always does, which is pricing things in a way that will surprise people. And the second thing that it is that the losers are people who think that they're smarter than that. All I can tell you is the David and Goliath story is a very good, cool story. You know what the David and Goliath story is not? Is not a way to live your life because, David never went out and said, oh, by the way, I defeated Goliath and his brother and I defeated all these other guys. Hey, one shot wonders, you know, got it. All right, what's the next question? Because I'm looking at the clock and we're rolling.
All right. What are the downsides of this type of situation for individuals and for the market in general?
So for individuals, if you view this as pure speculation and gambling, and you're willing to risk $1,000 and lose $1,000 and not have to worry about it, then you're okay. If you're like so many of the degenerate gambler, I mean the players that I played with in Vegas, you really can't afford to lose, but you are compelled to dive in here and do this. All of you who made a lot of money off of GameStop, my suggestion is that you take a breath and you say, you know what, I'm not going to plunge in again. Most of the time, people end up losing all that money that they won. To me, the general market is going to be just fine after this. The worst thing that could happen is, of course, is that people overreact to these things. And let's face it, if I bought it at $3 and sold it at $483, would I be here now? Probably would be. I didn't play this. In fact, when I heard about it, I had some friends who were playing a little bit of this. I said, look, I would buy and I'd get out because here's the thing: you never know when the music stops, if you're going to find another chair and what's going to happen. So what I would say is for the market in general, hopefully we don't see any stupid take place because of that. Just hoping. Now, oftentimes it does. Oftentimes we end up with some really dumb ideas, which, by the way, are going to end up hurting usually not the big guys. I mean, so the hedge funds will do just fine because, again, smartest people in the world, they'll figure out how to survive and make money. Small investors will be hurt the most if they go too much the other way. So we have time for just one more, Sandra, before we wrap up.
All right. What does this mean for the future of the stock market?
Well, hopefully what it means for the future of the stock market is that people participated in the market that never did it before. And that what they'll do is now here's the challenge. This was a clearly one-way street. Now, the challenge that we all are faced with when we're looking at the market is at any given moment, at any given point in time, the market is but a series of opinions about the value of something, whether it's valued appropriately or not. And when you're out there in the marketplace, you just have to know that these are all opinions and they are shouting at each other. This is not going to a cotillion. There is not a little, string section playing nicely in finger sandwiches. This is a very confrontational. If you're one of those people who's not a capitalist and you don't like confrontation and you don't like that, well, again, remember what I said about the tough shit card? Well, it's applicable here because that's the way the world works. We're doing battle. We're confronting other people's opinions. Now, it's not like doing battle physically, but we are putting our resources at risk and we are saying this is what we believe or not believe. The markets will be fine as long as the politicos and the regulators and the insiders don't rig the game in such a way that becomes less effective. Every time in a market is efficient, the market punishes those who believe that they are smarter than the market, and the market is always right. Jesse Livermore, who was one of the greatest traders of all time, but sadly took his own life when he didn't follow his own advice, is that when you are wrong against the market, there's only one thing you can do. You can agree with the direction the market is going. So listen to that advice because It's similar to walking to the edge of a river, watching which way it flows, crouching down, cupping your hands around your lips, and yelling wrong way because the river doesn't care. That giant river of a market, billions and trillions of dollars and euros and yen and won and all of those things, it doesn't care about what you're saying or not saying. In the big scheme of things, you are the one who's in charge of what you're going to do with your life. GameStop, in my mind, was in fact a great lesson for all of us. However, my guess is that 95, 98% of the lessons that people will gain will be incorrect. In summary, the correct lesson from GameStop is that when all of these people, and it's ironic, and maybe this is the way the universe works if one believes in a higher power, is gamification took over because people thought they were playing a video game. They were playing it with real money. So unlike, some first shooter where you can hit the button and get a new life, uh, this isn't the way it works in the real world. And then when the market becomes oversaturated and you don't get your orders transacted and all of that, you can say boo-hoo and cry, or realize that, well, this is the other side of shit happens and tough shit. So I should probably just do the shit show. We just do that of all these. But all I'm going to say is that's the life lesson. This isn't a video game. This is real life. And to me, GameStop just typifies what we have in this world. And all I can say is that I hope each and every one of you have success in whatever you're going to do. Remember, you are the one who is always making the decisions for you and your own life. Never, ever, ever, in my mind, sit there and say, oh, it is somebody else. I have had some very unfortunate business turns in my life. And when I finally accepted that I had to be the one, because I was the one who made those decisions, the outcome was not the way I thought it would be. If you don't learn from those lessons, then you are doomed and destined to live in regret and anger and repeat those. Learn the lesson of GameStop, which is the smartest guys in the room got stuck out. The brightest social media guys made a ton of money, but there's a whole bunch of people who didn't. And you don't want to be in the I didn't make it out alive. And with that, this has been the Raging Verbalist number 65. Go out and have a great one. Invest smart, invest wisely, and remember, as they say in a boxing match, protect yourself at all times when you enter the ring. And that ring, in this case, is the market.